When we were young kids, we thought it was only happening to you, and only later, well, to you too, and to you too, and to this one and the other one. We live with the drama of unsure whether we faced a great sinner or a great saint.
How can someone with a long history of abuse avoid punishment and still be seen as a saint by the public? How many accomplices are needed for that person to achieve their goal? What power structure lets evil thrive and continue spreading? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in this report, about that and many other things. It is historically known the relationship that the Catholic Church has with cases in which the rights of the weakest are violated. It's no secret that many men and women use the excuse of promoting faith to get close to the youngest, and thus subject them to their dark intentions. The Church appears increasingly attentive to related complaints as time passes, but even so, there is still evidence of how the institution as such prefers the path of cover-up. The story we're going to learn about today is proof of this. Today we'll meet a man blessed by the most prestigious popes who secured a place among the Vatican's highest ranks. A man who was introduced as the Apostle of Youth, a man who was for many a devoted saint and an example to follow, a man who proclaimed himself as the manager of initiatives that sought to make the world a better and fairer place. The presence of this man at religious events moved the faithful, and many asked him to pray for them. For many, his hand resting on the head of a sick person was a sign that a miracle was about to happen. However, over the years, another image of the man was built, one that contrasts with the one everyone wanted to sell and promote. An image that was kept in the shadows until there were no more shadows left to cover up so many aberrations. Then, the veil fell and the scandal quickly broke out. Abuse, deception, sect-like behavior, shady business dealings, large sums of money destined for mysterious purposes. Today we are going to investigate not only the abuses committed by this Mexican priest, but we will also delve into the dark business dealings in which he involved his congregation. We will hear the testimony of those who were by his side for years, and we will analyze the way the Holy See chose to respond to what was happening. Welcome to the case of Marcial Maciel degollado, the greatest predator of the Church. Before we start discussing the Church, priests, and other topics, I want to mention I released a new music video. I have a new music channel called Mephisto Music with a song called The Pact. It has a lot of this symbolism that we use so much on this channel, and there are people who sometimes get surprised and say, no, how can that be? It can't be. I didn't even notice it was called Mephisto. If you enjoy this content or have been here a while, I hope the people who've been here for a long time and used to watch my songs and music videos show up. Hell party, forget about this. I released a new music video on a different channel. Subscribe there. I'll put the link in the description, the first pinned comment, and at the end of the video. It couldn't be easier. And before we start, I also want to ask if you knew about this case, if you had heard about it. Leave your comments below. Tell me what you knew about it. Many thanks to all the members of the Mephisto clan, and without further delay, let's get started. In 1997, 8 people wrote an open letter that shocked a large part of the population. These 8 people were Félix Alarcón, José Antonio Pérez Olvera, Fernando Pérez Olvera, Juan José Vaca, Saúl Barrales, Alejandro Espinosa, Arturo Jurado, and José Barba. What did they have in common? They were former members of the Legionaries of Christ, a group led by the then famous, respected, and beloved Marcial Maciel. The letter they wrote was addressed to none other than John Paul II, who at that time presided over the Vatican. It was published in an American newspaper. Once it appeared on the streets, it became the main topic. News programs worldwide reported on it and supported its writers. I bet you're curious about the open letter. Actually, it said nothing. Well, the longer answer is that in those many lines, the 8 individuals claimed that Maciel had abused them 40 years ago when they were young. The impact doubled. When the accusers also decided to appear on a Mexican television program, the ratings skyrocketed. In their homes, everyone watched in shock as those men, all over 50 years old, recounted the sordid details of what they had gone through. They weren't only pointing at Maciel. They claimed that the open letter and the television appearance had been the final step in a difficult journey. For decades, they had to deal with the indifference of church authorities, who had repeatedly refused to take them seriously or give importance to what they were exposing. When they insisted, the voice on the phone had curtly told them that you don't prosecute a friend of the Pope. Their eyes showed not just the pain of their ordeal, but also the hurt of feeling betrayed and abandoned. One individual had violated them, yes, but an entire system of complicity had degraded them and tried to make them invisible. To the matter of abuse, already extremely serious in itself, an aggravating factor was added. Wasn't Maciel acting alone? Did his inner circle know what was happening when the cameras were off? After that open letter, the Catholic Church, and above all John Paul II, could no longer avoid having to give answers. But let's not get ahead of ourselves before knowing what repercussions all this would bring. It's necessary that we start from the beginning. On March 10, 1920 in Cotilla, Mexico, someone was born who appeared destined from a young age. Baptized as Marcial Maciel de Gollado, the boy was the grandnephew of the bishops of Veracruz and Chihuahua and second nephew of the bishop of Campeche. In his family tree, there were also canonized figures and men who had actively participated in the Cristero War, a Mexican civil war that lasted for 3 years, from 1926 to 1929. This war had pitted the government against militias of Catholic religious people who resisted the enforcement of the so-called Calles Law, which aimed to limit and control Catholic worship in the nation. Given this background, it's no surprise Marcial connected with religion early. Learning about his lineage quickly made him feel part of something bigger. Having an active role in the struggle to promote the faith almost seemed like a divine calling for the young man. Hueso told his parents that he wanted to be a devotee and dedicate his life to God. His parents nodded with pride, and in 1936 Maciel and his 10 siblings moved to Mexico City. At just 15 years old, but with unbreakable conviction, Maciel began his priestly formation there, at the seminary run by his great-uncle Rafael Guisar y Valencia. Other seminarians were somewhat prejudiced. They assumed that Maciel might receive special treatment just because of his blood relationship with the one who was supposed to instruct them. As days passed, it became clear the young man stood out on his own merits. His speeches were strong, his words warm, and his offerings dedicated. He was also restless. He tirelessly repeated that religion should play a more committed role in its surroundings. His resolve to pursue his projects was proven on January 3, 1941. He founded the Missionaries of the Sacred Heart and the Virgin of Sorrows, which would soon be called the Legionaries of Christ, a congregation that remains active to this day. What do these legionaries do? Basically, they bring together people with a lot of power and a lot of money from the church to, in their own words, bring the kingdom of God to earth. At the same time, the legionaries are part of the Regnum Christi Federation. The Regnum Christi Federation is an international ecclesial movement belonging to the Catholic Church. Lay faithful from many countries, along with interested bishops and diocesan priests, are part of this movement. It's also important to note that the Regnum Christi movement was founded by Marcial Maciel de Gollado. As we can see from his first steps, this man had a goal: to create spaces of unity among the powerful and influential in Catholicism. Beyond helping others, Marcial Maciel was committed to the more concrete organization of those who were supposed to preach the word. This ability to create bonds, connections, and become a key figure in those exchanges. It would end up placing him in a position of privilege that he would use to unleash hell itself. Marcial Maciel. 2 years after being ordained at the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico, Marcial Maciel moved to Spain. It was 1946, he was 25 years old, and his ambition was in full expansion. With other Mexican companions, he studied humanities at the Pontifical University of Comillas. He once again stood out for his insightful thoughts and ambitious projects. He had a very good reputation and had been praised by most of his superiors. That's why it surprised everyone when he ended up being expelled from this place. And what was the reason for his expulsion? Well, it's a secret. To this day, no one knows what happened there. However, this didn't stop him. Due to his family's influence, Pope Pius XII received him at the Vatican and held long meetings with him. The meetings' discussions were also not disclosed. What we can say is that, after a few months, the Legionaries of Christ were blessed by the Supreme Pontiff and established new schools and seminaries. In turn, Maciel created the Center for Higher Studies of the Legion of Christ in Rome. It's not really clear how, but suddenly this young man went from being a promising youth to a spoiled child. In 1950, his congregation was highly recognized in Mexico, and he began to receive more and more resources from the wealthy members of society. Some of these people truly believed in the transformative power of the word. Others were simply looking to ease their guilt. And the greater the guilt, the bigger the check, and Maciel welcomed both kinds of people. If they had money in the bank, the doors of the legionaries would open without hesitation. Maciel was undoubtedly a believer skilled at making good business deals. This frequent exchange of goods allowed the priest to have a powerful network of investors. Around that time, he began making generous donations to the Vatican, which, as you can imagine, doubled their enthusiasm for him. Today, many people claim that what Maciel was doing was starting to pay in advance. The silence of his superiors. In 1965, Pope Paul VI granted the Legionaries of Christ the Decree of Praise, which allowed the congregation to expand wherever they wanted. When John Paul II became head of the church in 1978, Marcial Maciel was already a top eminence. He advised priests and bishops, was a skilled benefactor, and boasted about the devotion others had for him. The new pope did not hesitate to take this virtuous man under his wing. And then, the rise did not take long. John Paul II asked Marcial to join him on many trips to Latin America and assigned him missions in Europe. And he appointed him as a permanent consultant to the Congregation for the Clergy in 1994. That same year, Maciel celebrated his 50th anniversary as a priest. John Paul II sent him a heartfelt letter praising his work and calling him an example to follow. In Mexico, there were masses and celebrations in his honor. Murals with his face and cards with his quotes were made. As a youth, he was thought restless and bold, but as an adult, he was viewed as wise and sensible. In light of all this, it's no surprise that everyone was shocked when the news broke in 1997. And that's how our story returns to the beginning. Public consciences. After 8 former Legionaries of Christ accused Maciel of abuse, several investigations emerged. These investigations came to confirm what the whistleblowers kept repeating. The Vatican had been aware of the priest's monstrous actions for decades. In fact, it came to light that the highest church authorities had received 240 documents that proved the situation. In 1988, many of Maciel's victims had sent their cases to a cardinal who would later become pope. We're talking about Ratzinger, who would later become known as Benedict XVI. And what did Ratzinger do? Well, he took all the complaints and put them away in the farthest drawer, way in the back, so that no one would find them. And are you interested in learning about the story of Ratzinger? We have a video that we made on the very day he died. On my other channel, The Day That, which is called The Day Ratzinger Died. Soon, more things began to emerge. In 2006, El País reported that the Legionaries of Christ founder was investigated from October 1956 to February 1959 on orders from Cardinal Alfredo Ottaviani, then the Great Roman Inquisitor. The results? Maciel was suspended for a while, but then he was reinstated to his duties. It hardly mattered that they knew his methods. Maciel remained a regular donor, which outweighed countless accusations. The testimony of those who said the man had violated their innocence mattered little. How he manipulated minors into thinking he was a heavenly gift mattered little. To have relations with him. It mattered little that it was proven he had bought houses for cardinals or that he was linked to drug trafficking. None of that mattered, not compared to the zeros in his increasingly lavish tips. Other legionaries, Catholic leaders, politicians, and tycoons protected him despite the victim's accusations. At the same time, John Paul II never stopped keeping him by his side and intervening on his behalf, well, at least until his death in 2005. So, with the death of the one who had protected him against all odds, Maciel was left on the ropes. That web of evil began to collapse, slowly but inexorably. With Juan Pablo II gone and accusations mounting, the church found itself at a dead end. They tried to calm things, but then the unexpected happened. Women appeared with whom the priest had fathered children, contradicting his vows. He had spent years talking about the value of chastity, years lying to everyone's face. They were surrounded, and this time they couldn't escape the public eye that was scrutinizing them, waiting for a concrete resolution. Even those who wanted to believe in Maciel's innocence needed a bit of clarity and to know what was going on. The accused claimed he was targeted in conspiracies purely out of envy. He confidently accused his accusers of trying to discredit God's plan. He said with equal enthusiasm he wasn't surprised by the attack. He knew that his work was changing the world, and he was convinced that many people didn't like that very much. Eager to keep claiming his innocence, Maciel set out to produce a series about his life to show what a good man he was, to show how much he had helped those most in need, in order to clean up his image. But this series was never released. In 2004, he was forced to resign as leader of the Legion of Christ. 2 years later, in 2006, when Ratzinger was already Pope, he ordered him to withdraw from public priesthood and devote himself to a life of prayer and penance. In a way, he was retiring him, giving him another chance to escape punishment. Marcial Maciel Degollado died of natural causes on January 30, 2008. The legionaries long denied accusations against the priest and, after Maciel's forced retirement, made no official statement, one way or another. In March 2010, they issued their first statement, acknowledging that the man who had founded them had done some reprehensible acts. The statement also said that, given the seriousness of his offenses, they could no longer take him as a model of Christian or priestly life. On May 1, 2010, the Vatican finally denounced Maciel's actions and said that the Legion needed reform. Therefore, a papal delegate was appointed to oversee the organization and its governance. Determined to give the project a facelift to keep it alive, the legionaries decided to prepare a properly documented report about what had happened in recent years. Regarding the priest, many saw this in a positive light. It seemed like a healthy search for redemption. And that's how, in 2019, they ended up publishing a report that would leave many people surprised. Apparently, Maciel wasn't the only one in the church who had committed such atrocious acts. Never. The report was titled X-Ray of 8 Decades to Eradicate Abuse, and it acknowledges that, in addition to the abuses perpetrated by Maciel, between 1941 and 2019 there was a total of 175 minors between the ages of 11 and 16 who were victims of abuse committed by 33 priests of the congregation. Likewise, 90 students from the organization's schools and seminaries were abused by 54 seminarians, 46 of whom never became priests. At this point, it's important to emphasize that all these priests, whether already ordained or still in training, had at some point been in contact with Maciel, so it's likely that the man even helped them commit their crimes. Was Maciel perhaps proud of having a group of people available to satisfy his darkest desires, both for himself and his close associates? Adding to these shocking revelations was the testimony of Elena Sada, born in 1964, who published a 2020 book about her experience in the female branch of the Legionaries of Christ. In those pages, the woman spoke about the constant brainwashing she suffered. She said that the group operated like a kind of sect, and that misogynistic and racist treatment was common there. People who didn't recruit others for the congregation were humiliated and called parasites. Those who did their job well received the dubious benefit of being able to mistreat the rest. And what happened then? Well, the newcomers ended up in a situation of tension among themselves, instead of aiming at the common enemy. Didn't they realize that, in reality, the one making them face off was that man who always appeared in the news? With a big smile, Elena also said that Maciel was addicted to morphine and had been hospitalized for overdose on 2 occasions. This addiction made him erratic and violent. The priest had no shame in hitting or belittling people and manipulated everyone around him, creating an atmosphere of paranoia that helped him control individuals. After Elena Sada revealed this, many started questioning the congregation's report from the previous year. Why didn't they mention these maneuvers? Why didn't they discuss their internal operations? Were they still working the same way? Were they trying to clean up their biography by leaving out these sordid details? At that moment, a group of private investigators reached a conclusion. The legionaries were using the case of Maciel and the abusive priest to try to gain legitimacy, and so that another fraudulent side of the group wouldn't emerge, one connected to what became known as the Pandora Papers. And yes, things still get even darker. Pandora! The Pandora Papers once again put the Legionaries of Christ in the spotlight, this time for financial maneuvers aimed at hiding funds. According to the documents, this group has investment funds in offshore companies amounting to about $295 million. These are 2 investment funds called Alpha Omega Trust and Salus Trust, based in New Zealand. The Pandora Papers are a set of 11.9 million leaked documents. This is the largest leak of financial secrets to date, surpassing the Panama Papers. The information in these documents is related to various offshore accounts of political figures and high net worth individuals. We're talking about 35 world leaders, more than 330 public officials from around 90 countries, and business people who appear in Forbes rankings, and a long list of tax evaders who operate in the shadows. As stated, owning an offshore company is not necessarily illegal, but it can be used as a front for various crimes, such as money laundering or terrorism. Ukraine and Russia have the most politicians named in the Pandora Papers. In the Americas, Honduras, Colombia, and Brazil are notable. Among the celebrities linked to this leak are Shakira, Pep Guardiola, Julio Iglesias, Chayanne, Claudia Schiffer, Ringo Starr, Elton John, and the writer Mario Vargas Llosa. As we already mentioned, the organization that Maciel once led also appeared in these papers, and the legionaries have only managed to state that it was all due to a mistake, and that the only fund they manage is intended to cover the healthcare of priests and consecrated people. The case remains with the judiciary. The independent journalists who found all the documents are calling for constant monitoring of the legal actions to prevent bribes or extortion. Meanwhile, having come this far, there is a key question. Although Maciel escaped justice, what happened to the other corrupt and abusive priests in the same congregation? What happened to those priests whom he endorsed and even accompanied so they could abuse innocents? Did they receive the punishment they deserved? Well, the answer is no. What? Of the 33 priests identified as perpetrators, 6 died without being tried by civil justice, 1 is currently being tried, and only 1 was convicted. The others have not been prosecuted so far, due to factors like legal situations in countries or statutes of limitations. The institutional response to the abuses that occurred from 1941 to 2005 is still very pronounced, because of the prejudices that existed at that time, and because the abuses were seen as a social taboo. Although the Vatican praised the courage and perseverance of those who accused the legionaries to demand the truth, most of the victims remain skeptical. They say the Holy See is just trying to minimize damage while protecting its own interests. In mid-2021, Pope Francisco caused a major shift in the internal regulations that govern the Catholic Church, by including in the Code of Canon Law an article that establishes pedophilia as a crime against the dignity of persons. It also condemns offending clergy and compensates victims. Although these things may seem new, the Church's internal penal system had gone 40 years without being updated, and there was fine print, more tools to absolve abusers than to help the abused. Despite the scandals, despite being a potential sect, and despite their questionable handling of funds, the Legionaries of Christ have continued to grow around the world. They now have over 40,000 members and educate more than 170,000 students in their institutions. Beyond the fact that freedom of worship is something that must continue to exist, the question is, have the infamous acts of the institution truly been eradicated? Was Maciel's death the endpoint for those shameful acts? Or do secrets still linger beneath the cassocks of its priests? And that's it for today's video. I hope you found the story of this terrible predator of the church interesting, just as there are many predators within the church itself. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and enable notifications. And I remind you, as I mentioned, that I have a new channel called Mephisto Music, and if you were interested in this topic, you'll enjoy the music video we made, because it has a lot of irony about all these issues. I invite you to watch. I'll leave the link here for you to check it out. It's called The Pact, also known as The Pact Magnum Mephisto, and it's on YouTube. If you can't find it, the direct link is in the description and the first pinned comment. And I thank each and every member of the Mephisto clan, because thanks to them I know we can make these videos, which are often demonetized by YouTube. With nothing more to say, I say goodbye. My name is Magnus Mephisto, and we'll surely see each other next time. Goodbye.